So I primarily work with clay. I hand build these sculptures, not using any tools, just my hands, and as a result of that process, they have a very touched surface that you can see my fingerprints all over them. It's not something I apply afterwards, it's just the record of that making process. And that they're constructed out of a thin skin of clay, which I build up gradually over time, not a huge length of time because clay is drying, so I sort of work with that drying process. And then they're fired just to really make them strong, and I might paint them, and at that point kind of combine other materials or found objects. And that bit of the process takes a long time. It might take over a year. And there are pieces in this exhibition actually where this ceramic element, it might be as much as like 8 years old, but it's just, and then I rediscovered it when I went back to work and did something completely different with it. So there's a very long, drawn-out gestation period generally. So all the works in this show have been made over the past 3 and a bit years. I had a child at the end of 2018, and when I returned from a period of maternity leave, I had loads of thoughts about what I wanted to make. It was a really creative moment for me. I also had a fellowship, a Leverhulme research fellowship, so all the time that my child was in nursery was time I could dedicate to being in the studio. And most of the work kind of reflects on my relationship with my new baby and the sort of anxiety and discomfort, I suppose, I was feeling at that time in negotiating this new role, and particularly in relation to what was going on in the world at that time. So it was during the pandemic, and then obviously we've had a kind of continual stream of horrific news that I suppose has impacted me emotionally quite significantly as I've been tending to this small child. So the title of the show, Night Portraits, refers to a series of works within the exhibition that are sort of formless, unpainted terracotta forms that kind of hang off tabletops and supports and have kind of wax exuding from them. And I think of them as kind of footnotes to the other pieces in the show. I suppose they kind of reflect on the sense of searching that's within the other works, and a lot of the thinking that went into the work, which happened at night after I'd finally got my child to sleep, and suddenly I'd be processing all the day's events. Yeah, so the night portraits are really about kind of looking for something, and I bite into them, so there are kind of teeth marks in them. And that's sort of about trying to take something in to understand it. You know, children put things on our mouths to kind of get a sense of our environment and our world. And I wanted those pieces to really have that feeling of trying to kind of hold on to something. So the piece I'm sitting next to here is called Behind Mother's Eyes, and it's actually the first piece I made. Yeah, see, I made this almost as soon as returning to work. So it's the oldest piece in this exhibition. You'll see there are these two holes in the legs of the sculpture, and I quite often will make holes in the work because I want people to be able to see that it's just a skin of clay, and I want the sculpture to breathe the same air we're breathing. The title, Behind Mother's Eyes, sort of comes from those two holes, which I think of as the sculpture's eyes. There's the image that the sculpture is representing, and then there's the sculpture, and it has its own kind of life and interior world. But also I think that title suggests, you know, that there's this body behind the mother's eyes. There's a body, and that is such a that physical relationship with a child is, I mean, that's how all the communication takes place in those early years. Sometimes I'll have a title, I'll make I wouldn't call it a title at that point, maybe a series of words or a word, and I'll make a work in response to that. And then other times that the title will come later, and it might be that I've been reading a particular poet at the time, or reflecting on a poem in particular. So there's a piece in the exhibition called The Wind's Hand, which refers to Sylvia Plath's poem Morning Song, which is about her confronting motherhood. Well, I make the work, it's very intuitive, the process, and it doesn't have, they don't have kind of clear meanings or definitions to me, and I suppose that's exactly what I anticipate an audience might take away. I think they respond to it, they project their own kind of personal experience and emotions onto the work, and that's exactly how I think it should be.